burn. Scoring judges, if you could please remember to keep your audio and video off and have the video set to hide all non-video participants so that the only folks on the video screen should be the people speaking and me. And with that, we're ready to get started. If I could have appearances for both sides, starting with the plaintiff.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Carolyn Boosmill, and I'm here with my co-counsel, Mr. Joseph Kalarian. Not sure if Joseph is able to pop up.
Apologies, Your Honor. My Zoom seems to have crashed for a second, but I will do my best.
No problem. And if you need to restart, we'll hold the proceedings until you can join us.
We're also here with Mr. Josiah Jones.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Hi, Mr. Jones.
And together we represent the plaintiff in today's case, Ms. Trey Westermeyer.
Great. And it looks like Mr. Kalarian, you're joined, so good.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Hi, Ms. Westenmeyer.
Your Honor, after the defense has stated their appearances, we have a few housekeeping matters we'd like to attend to.
Thank you. Let's have defense appearances first, please.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Harshita Kaladindi, and I, along with my co-counsel, Ms. Nithya Dandu.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Hi, Ms. Dandu.
And Mr. Thompson.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
Represent the defendant in today's matters, Ms. Kieran Walton.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Ms. Walton. Ms. Boosmail, you said you had a few housekeeping matters. Please proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. For the clarification of the court, Ms. Trey Westermeyer is suing the defendant in today's case for breach of implied warranty of habitability. Both sides agree that the defendant and Ms. Westermeyer had an effective lease from 2018 to 2019.
Thank you.
We'd also like to state that today's case is not bifurcated, and we as the plaintiff are pursuing both compensatory and punitive damages. The two amounts were discussed before trial. First, Your Honor, we're displaying stipulation 14 on the screen. Get that working. And stipulation 14 reads, without conceding any facts, both parties agree that Westermeyer would be owed $7,751.78 in compensatory damages if Westermeyer prevails at trial. Walton denies that Westermeyer is owed damages of any kind. And secondly, Your Honor, the prayer for relief, which is on the next slide, claims that we as the plaintiff are also pursuing punitive damages of no less than $500,000. We're seeking both of those amounts in trial today for a total minimum of $507,750.78.
Thank you, Counselor.
At this time, we'd also like to invoke Midland's Rules of Evidence 603 and 615, which constructively swear in and sequester all witnesses from the courtroom, barring any party representatives. The plaintiff's representative is Trey Westermeyer.
Thank you. And I assume that the defendant's representative is Ms. Kieran Walton?
Yes, Your Honor.
Excellent. Anything further from the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. Finally, it's our intention to use the share screen feature to show exhibits or documents as needed. Would Your Honor like us to ask permission before doing so, or just announce that we're doing so for the record?
You do not need to ask permission, and we'll assume that any exhibits that are shown up on the screen will be constructively outside the presence of the jury until they're admitted.
With that, Your Honor, the plaintiff is ready to proceed.
Excellent. Anything from the defense?
Just one further clarification, Your Honor. Once an exhibit has been admitted, would you like us to ask for permission to publish to the jury or just admit? Or just...
No, same. You can just admit it. And again, we'll just presume that once it was constructively outside the presence of the jury, then once it's admitted, everybody can see the screen.
Yes, Your Honor. With that, defense is ready to proceed to opening statements.
Excellent. Opening statement for the plaintiff, please.
Can the court see and hear me all right?
I can, Mr. Jones.
May it please the court. Her dream home was a nightmare. It's October of 2018, and Trey Westenmeyer is looking for her dream home, a place where she and her daughter can rest easily. she stumbles across Lakeside Apartments. It seems perfect. So she signs the lease and moves in. That's when everything changes. She has a bug problem. Brown spots start to appear all over her walls. She and her daughter wake up in pain. There are bites all over their bodies. Bed bugs have infested their clothes, their furniture, and their home. Miss Westenmeyer does everything she can to fix the problem herself. She sprays down her apartment, buys all the remedies she can afford, and desperately asks her landlord for help. But the biting, it just never stops. She can no longer afford her rent. She's forced to send her daughter away, and eventually, she's forced to move out too. All because her dream home was a nightmare. Today, you're going to learn all about the cause of that nightmare. You'll learn that before Miss Westenmeyer ever set foot at Lakeside Apartments, that building was riddled with bedbugs. Tenants just before Miss Westenmeyer complained that there were bedbugs. You'll hear today that there's just one way to treat a bedbug problem. That's by doing something called a heat treatment. You'll learn that the defendant in today's case never did that necessary heat treatment during Miss Westenmeyer's tenancy. And as a result, her dream home became a nightmare. It's for that reason that we, the plaintiff, are suing the defendant for breaching an implied warranty of habitability. Now, we know that sounds pretty technical, but all that means is the defendant rented out a property that was unlivable and failed to fix the problem. It's our burden to prove that to you by what's called a preponderance of the evidence, just more likely than not. We're going to do that by showing you three things. First, Miss Westenmeyer suffered from an infestation that was not her fault. Second, the defendant was made aware of that bedbug problem. And third, the defendant was unreasonable in treating that bedbug issue. We're going to meet that burden by calling three witnesses today. First, you'll hear from Miss Westenmeyer. She's the plaintiff and the tenant in today's case. She's going to explain to you how her home became a living nightmare. She'll tell you how she and her daughter were being eaten alive. She'll explain how she found evidence of bed bugs all over her apartment. When she told the defendant about it, the defendant failed to fix the problem. Next, you're going to hear from an expert in bed bugs today. He's going to talk to you about that one solution to treating a bed bug infestation. You'll learn there's one way to make sure those bed bugs never come back. That's by doing a heat treatment. You'll learn today the defendant never did that necessary heat treatment on Miss Westenmeyer's apartment. Finally, you're going to hear from a tenant who used to live at Lakeside Apartments. He lived in that building just before Miss Westenmeyer did. You're going to hear how he found bed bugs in his apartment and how those bed bugs predated Miss Westenmeyer. Members of the jury, by the end of today's trial, we will have shown you that those bed bugs were present in that apartment long before Miss Westenmeyer. And the defendant failed to do the necessary heat treatment in order to fix the problem. That's why at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Mr. Kalarian, will stand before you and ask you to find the defendant liable and charge them in the amount of $500,000 because Miss Westenmeyer's dream home was a nightmare. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Opening statement for the defense, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Members of the jury, the plaintiff caused a problem and then prevented the solution. We're here today because in November of 2018, the plaintiff Trey Westenmeyer brought bed bugs into Lakeside Apartments. Now, she had just taken a low-paying reporter job to support her and her daughter, and that meant traveling from one dingy motel to another, looking for a story. But when the plaintiff returned to Lakeside, she didn't just return with a story. She also returned with bed bugs. Now, a moment ago, plaintiff counsel got up here and told us that the plaintiff noticed these bed bugs and reported it to management. But I want to focus on something they left out, something they chose not to tell you about. Specifically, the numerous times plaintiff denied building staff any chance to enter her apartment, any chance to provide a treatment, any chance to deal with the problem. Ladies and gentlemen, the plaintiff caused the problem and then prevented the solution. Now, we're here today because the plaintiff has accused my client, Kieran Walton, of failing to properly address a bedbug infestation at Lakeside Apartments. Now, we're going to hear from Miss Walton today herself. She'll tell us how she always took bedbugs seriously. She'll tell us how Lakeside holds a special place in her heart. It was the first property she ever owned, the foundation of her success. Unfortunately, in November of 2018, the plaintiff moved into Lakeside. Now, we're going to learn that in order to provide for her daughter, the plaintiff took a job as a reporter, bouncing between motels to chase a story, until eventually a story took her to Motel 3. Now, we're going to learn about this motel from Lakeside's property manager today. He'll tell us how the plaintiff sent him an email complaining about this specific motel. We're going to learn the plaintiff could barely sleep at Motel 3. We're going to learn the plaintiff woke up itching at Motel 3. We're going to learn the plaintiff believed there were bed bugs at Motel 3. Even an exterminator will come before us today and confirm that travel, especially to motels, can lead to bed bugs. Members of the jury, it'll be clear, Motel 3 was the source of those bed bugs. And therefore, it was the plaintiff that caused the problem. Now that brings us to the solution of that problem. After discovering those bites, the plaintiff reported bed bugs to management. Ms. Walton will tell us herself that that very night, she called an exterminator to deal with the problem, even after the plaintiff admitted to her that she was likely the source of those bed bugs. Ms. Walton wanted to make sure the problem was fully addressed. Unfortunately, that exterminator is going to take the stand today and tell us how month after month, the plaintiff prevented him from entering her apartment. The plaintiff prevented him from treating the infestation. The plaintiff prevented the solution. Now, despite these facts, the plaintiff has brought a claim of breach of warranty of habitability against the defendant, Kieran Walton. Now, plaintiff got up here and listed 3 elements, but we agree on one of them, so there are only 2 you need to focus on today. First, the plaintiff needs to prove that she was not the source of those bed bugs. And second, she needs to prove that Miss Walton failed to take reasonable steps to treat them. Now, today, the burden rests solely with the plaintiff. As the defendant, Miss Walton has no burden. And if by the end of trial, the plaintiff has not proven each of these elements to be more likely true than not, you cannot find Miss Walton liable. As we go through today's trial, I want you to listen for a couple pieces of evidence. First, to how the problem was caused. Listen for where the plaintiff first complained about bed bugs. Listen for Motel 3. Next, to how the solution was prevented. Listen for the amount of times the plaintiff prevented an exterminator from treating her own apartment. After hearing all of the evidence and testimony here today, it'll be clear. The plaintiff caused a problem, then prevented the solution. As a result, my co-counsel Noah Thompson will come before us and ask that you find the defendant, Ms. Walton, not liable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sandu. Plaintiff, you may call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Trey Westenmeyer to the stand. May I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Can you see and hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Please, introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Hi, my name is Trey Westenmeyer.
What do you do for a living?
I work as a journalist for a local paper. I have to travel a lot, and that can be really hard on me and my daughter, but it pays the bills.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your daughter?
Yeah, her name is Kim, and she's 12 years old. It's been just the two of us since her father passed away a few years ago, so we've grown really close. She's my everything.
Why are you here today?
I'm here because my apartment was so infested with bugs that I was unable to live there anymore.
Well, I actually want to talk about that apartment. When did you and your daughter first move in?
I first found Lakeside Apartments in October of 2018. And at first it seemed like such a gift. I had rent that I could afford, and Kim could even have her own room. So I signed the lease and we moved in.
You just told us that apartment seemed like a gift. Did your experience ever change?
Sadly, it did. Not too long after we moved in, I was washing Kim's sheets and I noticed that her mattress was covered in these nasty brown spots.
Ma'am, I'm going to show you a couple of pictures. If we can get Exhibit 10 on the screen for me, this has not been pre-admitted yet. Ma'am, could you tell us, do you recognize Exhibit 10?
I do. These are the pictures of the brown spots in my apartment. At first, I just saw them on Kim's mattress, but then they were showing up all around. They were on her wall and all over her furniture.
Are they fair and accurate copies of that photo, of those photos that you took?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, plaintiff offers Exhibit 10 into evidence.
Any objection?
Without objection, Your Honor.
Excellent. Exhibit 10 is entered into evidence.
Thank you, co-counsel. You can take that down now. Ms. Westenmeyer, after you saw those brown spots, did you see anything else?
Well, one morning, me and Kim were eating breakfast together, and I noticed that she was itching at her legs, so I asked her to show me. I saw her legs were covered in these pink bite marks.
After you saw your daughter with bite marks, did you ever see bite marks like that again?
Yes. A few weeks after I saw them on Kim, I found them on myself. I woke up one morning and I had those same bites on my arms.
Did you ever find any bugs in your apartment?
I did. One day I was even able to take a picture of a bug that I found in Kim's room.
Would you be able to recognize that picture if I were to show it to you in court today?
I would.
Your Honor, we're bringing up Exhibit 2. This has not been pre-admitted. Ms. Westenmeyer, what's Exhibit 2?
Well, this is the picture of the bug that I took that I found in my apartment.
Is it a fair and accurate copy of that picture you took?
Yes, it is.
Plaintiff offers Exhibit 2 into evidence.
Any objection?
None, Your Honor.
Excellent. Exhibit 2 shall be admitted and published to the jury.
For the court's notes, this is stipulated to be a picture of a bed bug that was found in Unit 10.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can take that down now. Ms. Westenmeyer, I want to move on and talk about your interactions with Lakeside Management. Did you ever tell them about this bug problem you were having?
Of course. When I realized that we were being bitten, I reached out to the landlord, Kieran Walton, right away by emailing her personally.
How did the defendant, Miss Walton, respond to you?
Kieran told me that she would have her people take care of it, and then sort of just waved her hand at me.
Did she give you any kind of plan about what she was going to do?
No, she didn't explain any sort of plan to me.
Could you tell us what happened the following morning?
Sure. I woke up in the morning to loud banging on my door. I saw that it was the maintenance guy and some stranger that I didn't recognize. They told me that they were there to check out the bug issue, but I couldn't let them in at that time.
Why couldn't you let them in at that time?
I didn't want my daughter to be in the apartment while they were there. I don't like having strangers around my daughter. Plus, I didn't know what kinds of chemicals they could be spraying or treatments they could be doing, and I didn't want any of that stuff around my daughter either.
So what did you do?
I said that they needed to give me a warning before they could come into my home. My daughter was in the shower and getting ready for school, so I just asked that they call me to set up a time where they could come back later.
After you told those people that you needed a warning, did they ever call you to set up that time to come back?
No, they never did.
Did you ever see those people do any kind of treatment of your apartment?
No, I never saw that.
I want to move on and talk about your last few months living at Lakeside Apartments. Did your situation ever improve?
No, it just continued to get worse and worse. It felt like everything fell apart.
What do you mean when you say everything fell apart?
Soon, I decided that I could no longer allow my daughter to live in an apartment where she was getting eaten by bugs every night. It was a really hard decision, but I had to send her to live with my dad. Everything she owned had to stay, so we got her some clean clothes, and I had to say goodbye.
After you had to send your daughter away, what did you do?
I decided that I was going to stay and fight for our home. I had to stop paying rent so that I could use that money for sprays and other remedies to try to stop the bugs myself, but...
Objection to needlessly cumulative. If I may be heard, Your Honor.
You may. As to which portion of the testimony do you feel is cumulative?
As to the testimony regarding the money that Ms. Westenmeyer paid to spray and to replace household objects and the like, if I may be heard.
You may, briefly.
Yes, as opposing counsel pointed out in pretrial, it's been stipulated to what the compensatory damages are in this case already. Both parties agree that if Westenmeyer's claims are true, that she would be awarded a very specific amount of $7,458 in damages. Now, going over the specific payments she had to make to cover her expenses that she alleges is needlessly cumulative, as it's already been stipulated to.
I understand your position, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Jones, what's your response?
Yes, Your Honor. For something to be needlessly cumulative, it has to waste the members of the jury's time. Today, the plaintiff has brought a claim of breaching an implied warranty of habitability, meaning that we have to prove that the defendant is liable for compensatory damages. While we may have agreed on the amount before trial, we still have to prove to the members of the jury that the defendant is liable to pay that amount. This testimony is not needlessly cumulative because Ms. Westenmeyer is explaining the payments that she had to make as a result of the defendant's actions or lack of action.
May I briefly respond, Your Honor?
Very briefly. Your
Honor, this testimony doesn't go to any of the elements that the plaintiff has to prove here today. It doesn't prove that there was an infestation. It doesn't prove that Ms. Westenmeyer wasn't the cause, and it doesn't prove that Ms. Walton didn't take reasonable steps to resolve it.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Your objection is noted for the record. I'm going to overrule it. I think when the defense is running a theme that she prevented the solution, I think that her actions are relevant. I think it's a low bar, and I think that your 403 objection is overruled. So thank you very much. Let's move on, please.
Ms. Westenmeyer, you were telling us what you had to do after you sent your daughter away. Could you continue?
Yeah, I had to stop paying rent so that I could buy sprays and any other remedy that I could find to try to stop the bugs myself. But nothing worked. I still kept waking up every morning with bites.
What did you do after waking up every morning with bites?
After months of this, I woke up one morning and I just broke. I couldn't do it anymore. This had taken over my entire life. So I had to give up. I threw away most of my belongings and I moved in with my dad.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Westenmeyer. Your Honor, nothing further at this time.
Thank you, Counselor. Mr. Thompson, cross-examination, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Westenmeyer, I'd like to start by talking about where those bed bugs came from. Now, you travel a lot for your work as a reporter, am I right?
Sure, more than I would like.
You spend a lot of time in what you would describe as dingy motels?
That's right.
And in particular, you spend a lot of time in Motel 3.
That's a popular chain around Midlands, yes.
Ms. Westenmeyer, it's fair to say that you're not the biggest fan of Motel 3?
No, every bed is as hard as a brick in those places.
Yeah, you were so upset about the conditions at Motel 3 that you decided to write your boss an email about it.
I did.
And you'd recognize that email if I were to show it to you here today?
I would.
If my co-counsel could please bring up Exhibit 6. Now, Ms. Westenmeyer, this is that email, right?
Yes, so this was the email meant for my boss.
And it hasn't been changed or altered in any way since the last time you've seen it?
No.
Your Honor, the defense offers Exhibit 6 into evidence.
Any objection, Mr. Jones?
Yes, Your Honor, we object under 805, hearsay within hearsay, specifically to the last sentence of the first paragraph.
Mr. Thompson, what's your response?
Yes, Your Honor. Under Rule 801, to meet the definition of hearsay, there has to be a specific statement that's elicited. Now, the phrase, "I even heard someone in the lobby say something about bed bugs to the hotel manager," has no specific statement and is not hearsay.
Mr. Jones, you may.
Your Honor, if they're not offering that as a statement for the truth of the matter asserted, then it's absolutely not relevant because it doesn't make a fact of consequence whether or not there were bed bugs in that motel, more or less likely. To submit that information to the members of the jury is not relevant, and it becomes more prejudicial than it is probative at that point because we don't have the opportunity to cross-examine the person who made that statement. For all we know, this person could have been exclaiming how happy they were that bed bugs were not in that motel. For that reason, this should be constructively redacted from this exhibit before it's admitted.
Mr. Thompson, what is your response to Mr. Jones's argument that if that statement's not being offered for the truth, it's more prejudicial than probative?
Your Honor, we're not arguing here that that it doesn't have some truth value, only that it's not a specific statement. Now, there's just a general discussion that someone was talking about bed bugs. There's no specific statement being elicited in this document.
Right, I understand that. I think Mr. Jones' argument, if there's no statement, then it's not relevant. Or if it is relevant, it's more prejudicial than probative because you don't know what they were talking about. They could have been saying, to Mr. Jones's point, there were no bed bugs. What's your response to that argument?
Yes, Your Honor. When taken within the context of this email, it's clear that this was meant to be a complaint about Motel 3. Now, if you look at this, it's an email that the plaintiff sent to her boss complaining about the conditions, other pests around. And now it's clear that she intended this to be a statement about the poor conditions of that motel and the potential of bed bugs.
All right, Mr. Jones, one last shot, please.
Yes, Your Honor. We cannot make that leap in logic today. We don't have enough information from that witness who made this statement to jump to the conclusion that they were complaining about bed bugs. That statement, if it's not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, it doesn't make any fact of consequence more or less likely. And if submitted to the members of the jury, it becomes more prejudicial than probative since we don't actually know what that person was saying regarding bed bugs in that motel.
Thank you both. I am going to sustain the objection as to that statement and will be constructively redacted when it's shown to the jury, but otherwise the exhibit is admitted. Thank
If
you.
my co-counsel could please pull up a redacted version of Exhibit 6. Now, Ms. Westenmeyer, this is that email you sent to your boss, right?
It was the email meant for my boss. That's right.
You told them that you couldn't stand staying in Motel 3 anymore.
That's right.
You said that you woke up in the middle of the night itching, right?
I did, yes.
You thought it might be coming from some kind of mosquitoes or fleas or maybe even some other kind of pest.
That's right. The place was crawling with mosquitoes.
But you sent this email on November 2nd of 2018, right?
That's right.
No, Ms. Westenmeyer, it was just a few days after sending this email that you started finding signs of bed bugs in your home.
That's right.
It was just a few days after staying at Motel 3 that you started finding the signs of bed bugs in your home.
Yes, I found them in Kim's room, my daughter.
My co-counsel could please take that down. Now, Ms. Westenmeyer, let's talk about how you responded to finding those bugs. You told Ms. Walton, the building's owner, that you had a bed bug problem on November 29th of 2018, right?
That's right.
And the very next morning, well, the complex had an exterminator at your door.
At the time, I didn't know it was an exterminator, but that's right.
Now, you refused to let them in at that time.
Exactly. My daughter was in the shower at the time.
Ms. Westenmeyer, are you telling us here today that you didn't know it was the exterminator, even though you said on direct examination that they told you they were there to deal with the bug problem?
Well, I recognized the maintenance worker at the building, and he informed me that he was there for the bug issue, but I was unaware of who the other person was at the time.
So they did tell you they were there to take care of your bug complaint.
That's what the maintenance guy said.
Now, Ms. Westenmeyer, would you recognize your email that you originally sent complaining about those bed bugs?
To Kieran?
Yes.
Yes, I would.
If my co-counsel could please pull up Exhibit 5. Now, this is a copy of that email, right?
Yes, it is.
It hasn't been changed or altered in any way?
No.
Your Honor, defense moves Exhibit 5 in evidence.
Any objection?
Without objection, Your Honor.
Excellent. Exhibit 5 is received and shall be published to the jury.
Now, Ms. Westenmeyer, in this email, you asked them to act immediately on this issue, right?
Yes, I did.
You tell Ms. Walton that if she didn't act immediately, that you were going to withhold rent.
That's right. And Kieran showed up to my door that night.
Yeah. And the very next morning, you had an exterminator at your door once again.
Like I said, I didn't know who they were at the time.
But Ms. Westenmeyer, you told them to act immediately, and the very next morning, you had an exterminator at your door.
Sure. And then I asked them to call me to set up a future time, and they did not.
Yep. That exterminator was at your door the next morning, and you turned him away.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Thank you. Apologies, having trouble finding my unmute button. Mr. Jones, any redirect examination?
No, Your Honor, no redirect for this witness. We just ask that she be allowed to step down.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Westenmeyer. Plaintiff, you may call your next witness.
The plaintiff calls Dr. Howe to the stand. May I proceed? Please.
You may.
Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Good afternoon. My name is Dennis Howe.
Doctor, what do you do for a living?
I'm an entomologist.
What is an entomologist?
That's just a fancy way of saying I'm an insect expert.
Where are you educated?
I received my Bachelor of Science from the University of Florida and then went on to receive my PhD at Cornell University.
Can you describe your professional experience?
Certainly. I was the head researcher at a forensic entomology laboratory, and after that, an associate professor at Yale and Duke. Now, as much as I enjoyed teaching those kids, I soon had one more to deal with. So when my wife and I had our second child, I took an easier job in consulting.
Are you published in your field?
Absolutely. I have over 50 published articles, 6 of which are specifically related to the detection, treatment, and prevention of bed bugs. My most popular one is Sleep Tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite.
Doctor, how are you involved in today's case?
Well, I was hired by the plaintiff regarding a potential bed bug infestation in the apartment unit of Trey Westenmeyer, a tenant at the time of Lakeside Apartments. I was asked to determine whether the apartment's management took appropriate measures in treating that infestation.
What are bed bugs?
Bed bugs are small, resilient insects that live in household areas to feed off human blood. They're often found in furniture and commonly beds, which is how they got their name.
What information did you rely on in coming to your conclusion?
Well, I reviewed every affidavit in this case, along with a series of exhibits.
Did you use reliable principles and methods?
Yes, I performed what's termed a standard audit, which is simply a formal review of the facts in today's case. The methodology I used to conduct that audit is standard in my field.
Did you apply that method reliably to the facts of today's case?
I did.
Doctor, you told us you were hired to determine whether the defendant took appropriate measures in treating the bed bug infestation. Did they?
No.
Why not?
They did not follow the gold standard to treat a multi-unit infestation.
Before we talk about treatment, were you able to confirm that Ms. Westenmeyer's apartment had bed bugs in it?
I was.
How?
I saw photos.
Your Honor, we're now screen sharing Exhibit A, B, and C on the screen. These are already in evidence. Dr. Howe, do you recognize these images?
Yes, I do.
What are we looking at?
These are photos taken from Ms. Westenmeyer's daughter's bedroom. The black spots we see are actually fecal matter left behind by bed bugs.
Can fecal matter tell us anything about how many bugs are in the apartment?
Absolutely. Judging by the sheer number of spots and the different locations we see them in, we can tell there was an infestation in this apartment.
How would these bugs have gone into her apartment?
2 ways. Bugs can be brought in through travel, or they can be an already present and recurrent problem in a building. In that case, they'd move through cracks and openings in the walls from one unit to the next, and given the proper conditions, they can actually survive in a single spot for years at a time.
Do you know if Ms. Westenmeyer brought in the bed bugs herself?
Based on the evidence I reviewed, it's highly unlikely Ms. Westenmeyer brought them in herself.
Why is that?
Because if Ms. Westenmeyer had brought in those bed bugs, they would have appeared on her side of the apartment first, which was not the case. The first sign of bed bugs actually came from her daughter's side of the apartment.
Doctor, you mentioned that it's possible for bed bugs to travel through the cracks in the walls from one unit to the next. Is it possible that's how the bed bugs got into Ms. Westenmeyer's apartment?
It certainly is. The images from Exhibit 10 were actually taken near a vent, so it's entirely possible the bugs traveled into her apartment from a neighboring unit.
Your Honor, we're now ending the screen share of Exhibit 10. Doctor, let's talk about treatment. You said that the defendant didn't use the gold standard in treating a multi-unit infestation. Do you know if there was a multi-unit infestation in this case?
Yes, based on the information I reviewed, I can confirm this was a multi-unit infestation.
How?
Because 2 other tenants in the same building also found signs of bed bugs in their apartments.
And were those units close to Ms. Westenmeyer's apartment?
Yes, one of them was actually in the unit adjacent to hers.
So what is the gold standard for treating a multi-unit infestation?
The gold standard to treat a multi-unit infestation is heat treatment.
What is heat treatment?
Well, heat treatment is a special process that uses equipment to heat an entire building to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. At this temperature, bed bugs and their eggs cannot survive, and so the best way to guarantee a complete elimination is heat treatment of the entire building.
And are there other treatments for bed bugs besides heat treatment?
There certainly are, though they are not as effective.
Why are they not as effective?
That's because other methods require follow-up treatments and don't guarantee results.
Why don't they guarantee results?
Well, other treatments are termed spot treatments, which don't guarantee that every bug and every egg has been eliminated. If even one bug is left alive, a brand new infestation could emerge at an alarming rate.
And if other methods aren't as effective, why are they used?
That's because heat treatment is the most expensive. It can run upwards of $20,000 depending on the building, whereas other methods are much cheaper since they don't guarantee results.
Doctor, did the defendant ever use heat treatment to treat the bed bugs while Ms. Westermeyer was a tenant?
No. The defendant did not follow the gold standard while Ms. Westermeyer was a tenant. Heat treatment was never used.
Thank you, Dr. Howe. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Thank you, Counselor. Ms. Dandy, cross-examination, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Howe. I want to start talking to you about your conclusion, specifically where the bed bugs came from. Now, I want to first focus on what happened during the plaintiff's tenancy. The plaintiff and her daughter were the first to report suffering bites.
That's right.
The plaintiff was the first to complain to management about a bed bug problem.
Yes, Ms. Westermeyer's daughter, Kim, had found bites on her.
The plaintiff was the first to report to seeing any bed bugs.
That's right.
Now, the plaintiff lived in unit number 10.
Yes, that's correct.
That was the first place bed bugs were reported.
Yes.
It was only months after the plaintiff moved in. Taylor Bauer, her neighbor, reported seeing bed bugs in January of 2019.
Yes, eventually she did.
Taylor Bauer lives in unit number 11.
That's right.
Shortly after, Taylor Bauer's other neighbor also reported bed bugs in June of 2019.
Yes, eventually.
They live in unit number 12.
That's right.
Doctor, following this timeline, bed bugs were reported from unit number 10 to number 11 and then to number 12.
Yes, but we can't confirm that. There's evidence that there were pests in Ms. Bauer's apartment.
Again, following this timeline, Doctor, the bed bugs first showed up in unit number 10.
That's right.
They then showed up at unit number 11.
Yes.
And finally, they moved to unit number 12.
That's right. That was the order of reports.
Objection, prejudicial and probative. I may be heard.
You may briefly.
Yes, Your Honor. This opposing counsel is asking this witness about when the bed bugs showed up. He can't possibly, or I'm sorry, Your Honor, my objection is to speculation. She asked this witness about when the bed bugs showed up. He can't know when they showed up because he wasn't there. She can only ask him about when it was reported that the bed bugs were in the units.
I would agree, except that your witness already answered the question. I know there's some technical difficulties with it going over Zoom and folks talking to each other. So I would just ask Dr. Howe, pardon me, if you do hear an objection or it looks like someone is starting to talk, if you could just hold off on your answer. So your objection is noted, but it's overruled because the witness already answered. Thank you, though.
Yes, Your Honor.
And now, Dr. Howe, to rephrase, that's starting with the plaintiff's unit number 10, right?
Yes.
Well, doctor, let's talk about travel as a source of bed bugs. You'd agree a person is likely to become a carrier of bed bugs when traveling.
They can be, if the place they stayed at had bed bugs.
Well, specifically in places where groups of people congregate, right?
That's right.
One of those places is motels.
Yes.
When someone sleeps at a motel, bed bugs have a sustained opportunity to latch on to their possessions.
Yes, that's one of the ways they travel.
They can collect on clothing stored in a hotel closet.
That's right.
They can collect on luggage underneath a bed.
Yes,
They then can hitch a ride back with them to their home.
right.
Once they're in the home, they can travel anywhere else.
That's possible.
Well, I want to focus on how those facts align with the behavior of the plaintiff. And based on the evidence you reviewed, the plaintiff regularly stayed at hotels.
That's right. I believe they were a journalist.
Specifically, doctor, the plaintiff stayed at Motel 3.
That's right, which is why it was important that I checked in on all the motels.
You reached out to Motel 3, doctor?
I did.
Well, you never heard back from a single employee of Motel 3, did you?
Unfortunately not.
You never visited Motel 3 in person?
No, due to the ongoing pandemic, I was unable to conduct my in-person reviews.
Because of that, doctor, you don't know if Motel 3 had any bedbug problems when the plaintiff stayed there.
I can't say for certain.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Any redirect examination?
No, Your Honor. May this witness be excused?
You may. Thank you, Dr. Howe. Plaintiff, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff calls Avery Larson to the stand. May I proceed?
You may.
Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Afternoon. My name is Avery Larson.
Mr. Larson, where are you from?
I'm from the state of Texas, but I moved here to Midlands just a few years ago, maybe more than a few.
Why'd you move here to Midlands?
Sir, whoever said everything is bigger in Texas clearly wasn't talking about the salaries there. So I moved over to Midlands to follow my true passion.
What do you do for a living?
That would depend on who's asking. To my mama, I'm now unemployed. But to the government, I'm still unemployed. To me, though, I consider myself to be a country musician, a pretty good one at that.
So where do you live now, sir?
I live with my mom and dad. I love her to death. Poor lady, so old that sometimes I think her social security number can only be 3 digits. Bless her heart. But she always kept me well fed, which I appreciate. But I do miss the privacy of my old apartment sometimes.
Sir, where was your old apartment?
It was actually right here in Midlands. It was called Lakeside Apartment Buildings.
When did you live at Lakeside Apartments?
I would say from about 2012 to 2014.
Sir, I want to talk about your experience at Lakeside Apartments. While you lived there, did you ever see any pests in the building?
Sir, I did. In my own apartment, actually.
Could you tell us what happened?
It was right around the time I moved out. I was walking into my bedroom and I had a whole bunch of M&Ms in a bowl and I tripped and dropped off. As I was shoveling them back into the bowl, some of them looked a little funny. Sir, I'm pretty sure M&Ms, they don't have any legs on them. Turns out there were some bugs.
Sir, what do those bugs look like?
Objection, Your Honor, as to improper character evidence. May I be heard?
Briefly.
Your Honor, opposing counsel is alleging that since Lakeside had bugs in the past, in 2012, when this witness lived there, that they did in 2018. Now, we heard in opening statements, Mr. Jones got up and told us that this was an ongoing infestation from 2012 to 2018. But Your Honor, the plaintiff has to establish that causal chain. And we have it in a good faith basis that they can't do that. Since this witness moved out in 2012, he has no idea whether these bugs were treated after he moved out and whether that infestation continued. So at this time, this is improper character evidence under 404A.
Thank
Response,
you.
Your Honor.
Please.
Your Honor, something is character evidence if it shows action and conformity therewith. And even if we are doing what the defense is trying to say, we're trying to show that these bed bugs predated Miss Westenmeyer. But it's not character evidence because these can be plausibly connected to the case at hand. If the defense wants us to lay that causal link, that's exactly what we're doing right now. And matters of whether or not the bed bugs were treated or not, that goes to weight, not admissibility. It's perfectly admissible for this witness to tell us that he saw bugs that looked like bed bugs in his apartment before Miss Westenmeyer got there, especially when they're claiming today that she's the one that brought the infestation herself.
Your Honor, if I may.
You may.
This is propensity evidence. They're saying that since Lakeside may have had a bed bug problem 9 years before Miss Westenmeyer, moved in, that problem is an issue at hand today. That is not allowed, and the plaintiff can't testify, Mr. Larson can't testify as to what happened after he moved out in 2012 and before the plaintiff moved in 2018. That causal link can't be established.
I agree with you that he can't testify to that if that's in fact when he moved out, but I am going to overrule the objection on the basis that first, and please correct me if I'm missing something, but what is the trait of character that you feel is at issue here?
Your Honor, it is propensity evidence that since bed bugs were an issue in the past, that is what was an issue in 2018. Under 404B, Your Honor, excuse me.
I understand the rule, and I understand that you're arguing that it's being used improperly for propensity. I'm asking what trait of character is at issue?
Having bed bugs.
Okay, I'm going to overrule the objection on the grounds that I don't think having bed bugs is a character trait, and therefore 404B isn't implicated. I think I'm also going to overrule it on the basis that this witness can testify as to his knowledge in 2012, but if he goes beyond that, if he starts testifying about what might have happened after he vacated the premises, please feel free to object on speculation or whatever other grounds you think may be implicated by further questioning. But at this point, the objection is overruled. Thank you.
Sir, just to clarify, when did you see that bug?
I saw it right around the time I left, which must have been 2014.
Sir, if I showed you a picture of an insect we've been referencing in trial today, could you tell us if it looked like the bugs that you saw in your apartment?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time, we're now displaying pre-admitted Exhibit 2. Mr. Larson, this is Exhibit 2. Do you recognize what I'm showing you?
Yeah, it was a small bug. It had a bunch of legs on it, looked exactly like that.
Sir, when you saw this bug, or a bug that looked like this in 2014, do you know if someone named Trey Westenmeyer was living in the building?
I don't recognize that name, sir. I was friendly with all of my neighbors. I like to speak with them and chat with them. I don't remember anyone by Trey when I lived there.
So, sir, did you tell anyone about this bug in your unit?
Yeah, funny enough, the day after I saw that bug in my apartment, there were a whole bunch of exterminators walking around the buildings with their equipment and their suits. I called one of them over and asked him to take a look just to make sure it wasn't a problem.
Do you know what that exterminator did?
Sir, to be honest, not very much. I saw him spray a little bit. He wiped the area down, pat me on the back, and told me I was good to go. Must have taken him 5 minutes.
Thank you, counsel. You can go ahead and take that down. So, sir, to your knowledge, was that the only time your apartment was treated for bed bugs while you lived there?
Yes, it was around 5 minutes of a quick spray and wipe and nothing else.
Well, did you ever tell your landlord about these bed bugs?
Yeah, I went up to Kieran and told them I saw some bugs and someone had taken care of it.
Sir, now I want to talk about something called heat treatment. When you were at Lakeside, did anyone mention anything about heat treatment to you?
No, sir. I spoke pretty often with that exterminator after he treated my apartment. Not once did they say anything about a heat treatment to me.
Well, did your landlord, the defendant, ever mention heat treatment?
What, sir? He did, just not to me.
What do you mean not to you?
Well, a few years later, my landlord was throwing some big party that I was performing at. When I actually saw my landlord in the crowd talking to a whole bunch of people at the after party.
When you saw the defendant talking to a whole bunch of people, did you hear anything?
Yeah, I decided to listen in a bit. My mama told me it's always rude to eavesdrop, but if you're gonna do it, you have to hold your breath to make sure you hear everything that they're saying, and that's what I did.
So what did you hear your landlord say?
I heard him talking about Lakeside Apartments. They said that they had a pest problem there that apparently half the residents had complained about.
So after the defendant said they had a pest problem that half the residents were complaining about, they say anything else?
Yeah, they said that one of their employees kept trying to get them to spend a whole bunch of money on a really expensive heat treatment there.
Did the defendant say what they did to that employee who asked for that heat treatment?
Yes, sir. My landlord said they fired him. They said that they'd never pay for something like that.
After the defendant said that he would never pay for that heat treatment, did they say anything else?
No, sir, never again. In fact, I heard them call Lakeside the dump and said I could finally tear that Lakeside apartment building down and build new luxury apartments there.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
Thank you. Cross-examination, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Larson.
Hi there.
I want to start by talking about what happened when you were living at Lakeside back in 2012.
Sure.
Now, as you mentioned on direct, there was some pest specialists that came into Lakeside in 2012, right?
I didn't know what they were, but they had the suit, they had Bugs Be Gone, and they came to my apartment. Yes, ma'am.
When they came to your apartment, you saw them carrying all this fancy equipment, right?
Yes, ma'am. It was all shiny and gray. I didn't know what it was for.
They were wearing protective suits, masks,
Yes.
gloves,
Yes.
and you saw them go into Unit 10, right?
I did from my door. Yes.
And then later you saw them go into every unit on that floor.
Yes. They went in and out to basically every unit that I saw.
Including your unit, right?
Yeah. I actually called them over to my unit.
Well, let's talk about what happened when they came over to your unit. You were concerned about some spots in the corner of your apartment, right?
Some spots, and I thought I saw some dead bugs there too.
Right. So you asked the exterminator to come and take a look.
Yeah, just to make sure it wasn't a big deal.
He looked through your entire apartment,
Yes.
your mattress,
Yes.
the baseboards,
I think so. Yes.
the vents.
Yeah, he couldn't really fit in them, so he just shined his flashlight inside.
He even looked through your dresser.
Yes, ma'am.
And then he sprayed the entire apartment down.
Yeah, I didn't even have to leave or anything. He just told me to stay in a different room while he sprayed.
Now, Mr. Larson, after that spraying, you never had another issue with bugs, right?
Yes, ma'am. I also think it's because my mama gave me a stuffed duck that I put where I saw the bugs. I think it scared them away.
So that's a yes to my question. After the spraying, you never had any issues with bugs.
Yeah, I moved out shortly after that.
All right. Now I want to talk to you about a conversation that you had with Miss Walton about treating bed bugs. You talked to Kieran about various treatments for bed bugs, right?
Yeah, I asked Miss Walton what she was planning on doing or what kind of treatment they did in my apartment.
And Miss Walton told you that it's critical to use the best treatments for bed bugs, right?
Yes, she said.
And how it's important to have specialists handle these matters.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Response, Your
As
Honor.
to Ms. Walton's statement?
To Ms. Walton's
your-
statements, Your Honor.
Sure. And response, please.
Your Honor, this is going to show knowledge on the part of Miss Walton. defense will be calling an expert in different kinds of bed bug treatments. So we're not using this to prove the truth of the matter asserted, but rather that Miss Walton had the knowledge on how to treat bed bugs and that she did so.
Your Honor, may I respond to that? Your Honor, in this case, we believe they are using it for the truth of the matter asserted, specifically that Miss Walton did conduct those treatments on Mr. Larson's apartment. If they want to ask about Miss Walton's knowledge of those treatments, she'll testify in trial later today. There's no need to elicit it through a hearsay statement.
Thank you. The objection is noted but overruled. If you feel like that they are starting to use it for the truth, we can issue a limiting instruction to the jury that they're not to take this portion of the testimony for truth. But other than that, the objection is overruled. Thank you.
So, Mr. Larson, that's a yes to my question that Ms. Walton said it's critical to hire specialists to handle these matters.
That's what they said, yes.
And Mr. Larson, you believe that Ms. Walton jumped on this issue and solved it right away?
For my apartment, yes. But when I asked her about it, what she didn't really answer my questions.
All right, Mr. Larson. Now I want to move on and talk about your time at Lakeside. So you lived at Lakeside about 9 years ago, right?
I moved in about 9 years ago. I left in 2014.
Mr. Larson, is it your testimony here today that you moved out in 2014?
Yes, ma'am. I moved out of Lakeside apartment in 2014.
Would you recognize a copy of your affidavit if I were to show it to you?
Yes, ma'am. I'm the one who said it.
All right. And Ms. Herzog, could you pull up a copy of Mr. Larson's affidavit for me? Now, can you see that, Mr. Larson?
Sorry, I have to lean forward a bit. Yes, ma'am.
No, this is your affidavit.
It looks to be so. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Herzog, can you go to the last page? And that is your signature.
Avery Larson. Yes, ma'am.
And you knew you had up until opening statements today to change or add anything to this document, right?
Yes, ma'am. Someone came up to me and asked if I wanted to change anything, and I said no.
All right. Ms. Herzog, could you go to line 69 for me? Now, Mr. Larson, please follow along silently while I read aloud for the court. I moved out of Lakeside Apartments in December of 2012. Did I read that correctly, Mr. Larson?
Ma'am, that's what it says.
That's what your affidavit says.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Herzog. You can take that down. And so you wouldn't know what happened at Lakeside after you moved out.
Well, ma'am, after I moved out, I didn't go back. So, no, I don't know what happened when I left.
So after 2012, you don't know if Lakeside had any bed bug problems.
No, I wouldn't say so.
You wouldn't know if they had any heat treatments done.
Absolutely not. I just heard Kieran in 2019 said that he would never pay for a heat treatment.
And Mr. Larson, you don't even know the plaintiff, Miss Westenmeyer.
Oh, no, I've never met.
Now, let's talk about why you left Lakeside in 2012. One of the main reasons you left Lakeside Apartments was because of your dislike for Miss Walton, right?
I wasn't very fond of Miss Walton. You're right.
And it's safe to say you're holding a grudge.
Ma'am, every time I'd speak to them, they'd spit in my face a little bit and they'd ignore my questions.
Mr. Larson, is that a yes to my question that you're holding a grudge?
I don't like them very much. You're right. Yes.
And you have nothing good to say about Miss Walton.
You could say that. Yes.
Just the thought of her makes your blood boil.
I'd say so. Yes.
So here you are, 9 years later, testifying against her.
Yeah, I was told to talk about my experience at Lakeside Apartments.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Any redirect examination?
There's no redirect for Mr. Larson, Your Honor. May he be excused?
He may.
And with that, Your Honor, the plaintiff rests its case in chief and requests a brief 5-minute recess, depending on all laws.
Yes, please. Let's take 5 minutes. it's 10:19 where I am. So let's take 5 minutes and come back at my 11:20 or 10:24. And I apologize for not having the time conversions for wherever you all are, but let's take 5. Thank you, everybody. Okay, let's please come back to order. If I could have a representative from each side, please just let me know that your team is back and ready to proceed.
Your Honor, defense is back and ready to proceed.
Excellent. Plaintiff, do we have you with us?
We do, Your Honor. Plaintiff is back and ready to proceed.
Excellent. How about my scoring judges? Judge Pope, are you with us?
I am. Thank you, Your Honor.
Excellent. Judge Fain?
Here.
Judge Sokoloff?
Here.
Judge Dowell?
Here.
And Judge Reisner? Judge Reisner, are you here? Judge Reisner, if you're here, if you could please unmute yourself and let me know that you're present or send me a message.
I'm ready.
Excellent. Okay, with that, we will get started. Defense, you may call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Defense calls Jesse Rogers to the stand. May I proceed?
You may.
Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Hi, my name is Jesse Rogers.
Mr. Rogers, what do you do for a living?
I manage Lakeside Apartments in Midlands. I like to call it Mr. Rogers' neighborhood.
How long have you been at Lakeside?
I'm going on 6 years now. Yeah, I started out in 2015.
Tell us how you ended up at Lakeside Apartments.
Well, I don't want to get into the weeds on this, but I used to be a pro tennis player. And basically, I got a career-ending injury and I had no backup plan. But when I couldn't play tennis anymore, I called Kieran Walton and she gave me this job at Lakeside.
How do you know Miss Walton?
Well, back in my tennis days, I spent a lot of time at the Walton Hotel, going to events, parties, charities, a couple wakes. And yeah, I got to know Kieran pretty well there.
When you first started at Lakeside, did you have any experience in running an apartment building?
No, I didn't, but Kieran assured me the job wasn't complicated. I just had to maintain the budget and stick to the jobs I had.
What were the jobs you had?
Well, it's not much. I answer complaints, which pretty much involves getting the repairman, Sam Lyons, to fix the issue or hiring an outside firm. I collect rent and I fill vacancies by putting ads online.
Mr. Rogers, I want to talk about the plaintiff, Trey Westenmeyer. Can you tell us how you know her?
Yeah, well, Trey was an old tenant at Lakeside, kind of a frequent flyer, always coming in and out of the building.
What do you mean by that?
Well, she told me she's a reporter, so she stays in a lot of, in her words, dirty motels for work.
After moving in, did the plaintiff ever mention those dirty motels to you again?
Yeah, actually, she sent me an email about them. It was addressed to boss, so I don't know if it was meant for me, but yeah, no, that's about the only email she's ever sent me.
Would you recognize that email if I were to show it to you?
I would, yeah.
Ms. Herzog, could you put a copy of Redacted Exhibit 6 up for us? Mr. Rogers, is this that email you received?
Yeah, that's the one.
So when did you get this email?
November 2nd, 2018.
Can you tell us what it's about?
Yeah, basically, Trey was complaining about some Motel 3 she was staying in.
What about the Motel 3 was she complaining about?
That it's bad, I guess, saying the bed's a brick and she's going crazy trying to sleep, waking up in the night, itching and scratching like bugs are biting her.
Thank you, Ms. Herzog. You can take that down now. Mr. Rogers, after sending this email complaining about bugs to her boss, did the plaintiff ever complain to you about bugs?
Yeah, a couple weeks after I got this email, Trey called me up, nearly blew my eardrum. She started yelling at me about bed bugs in her unit and how we needed to fix it.
When was that?
Right after Thanksgiving. I want to say November 29th, 2018.
What did you do after receiving that phone call?
Well, I mean, bed bugs in an apartment, that's a pretty big deal. So I called up Kieran and she told me I need to solve it immediately. So I got the old repairman and a company called Bugs Be Gone to check out Trey's unit.
When did Bugs Be Gone come to check out the unit?
The next morning, I got over at Bugs Be Gone, very rigid, very punctual.
Did they find anything in the plaintiff's apartment?
Not exactly. Despite Trey insisting we solve it immediately, she didn't even let us in. So we had Bugs Be Gone go in there another time.
Do you know if they ever got in there?
Yeah, a couple days later, Bugs Be Gone got in, sprayed the place down.
After that spraying, did the plaintiff ever complain to you about bed bugs again?
No, that was the first and last time I heard about bed bugs from Trey.
Did you ever talk to the plaintiff at all after that spraying?
Yeah, I did. Wasn't for a couple months though, because Trey stopped paying rent, which, was concerning. So I went to go see her about it.
What happened?
She just kind of blew up at me, waved her phone at me, and yelled about Kieran.
What do you mean she was waving her phone at you?
She had her phone out with some sort of picture on it, and she was waving in my face. I didn't know what it was a picture of at the time because she wouldn't tell me, and she was moving it too fast. But I know now it was a picture of a bug.
What did she do next?
She just told me she's known she could take Kieran down for a long time now.
All right, Mr. Rogers, I want to take a step back and talk about the plaintiff's unit. Do you know which unit she lived in?
Yeah, Trey, she lived in Unit 10.
Before the plaintiff, how many people lived in Unit 10?
Well, from my time in 2015 to Trey, about 5 different tenants lived in that unit.
Have any of those 5 tenants ever complained to you about bed bugs in Unit 10?
No, I had never heard anything about bed bugs from them.
Mr. Rogers, during your time at Lakeside, have any of your tenants ever complained to you about bed bugs?
No. First I heard about bed bugs was from Trey, about a month after she moved in.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Cross-examination, please.
Yes, Your Honor, just a brief moment to rearrange.
Sure.
May I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon, Mr. Rogers. Can you see and hear me all right?
I sure can. Good afternoon.
I want to start by talking about why you're testifying here in court today. Sir, you know the defendant, Kieran Walton, right?
That's right. Yeah, she's my boss at Lakeside.
You're aware she owns that building, true?
Yeah.
You'd agree with me, Mr. Rogers, in 2015, you were in need of a job.
I was, yeah.
So you called the defendant, right?
Correct. Yeah, I met her a couple years before that, and I asked her if she had any work for me.
She gave you the job as the property manager at Lakeside Apartments.
Yeah, she hired me.
I want to be clear, sir, you had no prior experience as a property manager at Lakeside. Excuse me, you had no experience as a property manager in the past, right?
Yeah, no, before this, I was a tennis player.
The defendant told you when she hired you, all you needed to do was spend less money than her last property manager, right?
That's right, yeah, maintain that budget.
Sir, I didn't ask about maintaining the budget. The defendant told you she wanted you to spend less money than her last property manager, right?
Yeah, that's what she said.
She also asked you to keep the tenants off her back.
Right, that's where answering complaints comes into play.
I want to move on and talk about what you can't tell us about today's case, Mr. Rogers. Sir, you'd agree with me. You're not an entomologist, are you?
No, I'm not that into bugs, actually.
You don't have any special training in treating bug problems, right?
No.
You don't have any education in treating a bed bug issue in an apartment, right?
No, I don't deal with that sort of thing.
You can't tell us anything about the condition of Miss Westenmeyer's apartment as it relates to bed bugs, can you?
No, I've never really been in there.
I want to move on and talk about what you can tell us about today's case. Sir, during the midst of this bed bug issue, you actually became aware of something called a heat treatment, right?
Yeah. I was playing cards with the repairman one night, and he told me about this thing called a heat treatment.
So you suggested to the defendant that she do a heat treatment in Lakeside Apartments, right?
Yeah, after Sam told me about that, I thought I'd bring it up to Kieran.
At that point, in response, the defendant asked you, do you know how much that costs?
She did ask that. I didn't know how much it cost.
She told you, I fired my last property manager for spending too much of my money, right?
Yeah, she said that.
It was at that point when the defendant brought into question your job, sir, that you changed your mind about heat treatment. True?
Well, yeah, Trey didn't think it was necessary.
You never brought up.
Sorry, Kieran.
That's right, sir. You never brought up heat treatment ever again, right?
No, and to be honest, I don't really even know what that is.
And here today, you know that the defendant never paid for heat treatment during Trey Westenmeyer's tenancy, right?
Yeah, no, that wasn't done.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Rogers. Your Honor, nothing further at this time.
Thank you. Any redirect examination?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just asked that Mr. Rogers be allowed to step down.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rogers. Defense,
you.
you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the defense calls Blaine Crawford. Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Hi, my name's Blaine Crawford.
Mr. Crawford, what do you do for a living?
I'm an exterminator for Bugs Be Gone. We're a pest control company based out of Midlands.
Well, I'd like to begin with your experience there. How did you become an exterminator?
Sure, well, around 2010, I got hired as an exterminator at a different company called the Pest Specialists. They had offered me a position with on-the-job training, and they had a lot of experience dealing with all kinds of infestations, so it was a great place for me to learn.
What exactly was your position there?
Well, first off, they made me shadow expert exterminators to kind of learn the ropes and whatnot. So I worked with them on a whole bunch of different issues, but especially those dealing with insect problems like termites and bed bugs.
Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with bed bugs?
Sure. Some of my first solo jobs as a licensed exterminator were actually dealing with bed bugs. And I've worked as the lead exterminator on about 20 jobs specifically with them.
Do you have any academic training?
Not exactly. I never went to school or anything like that, but I do keep up to date with the latest publications on pest control. I'm a certified and trained exterminator, and I have a lot of on-the-ground experience both identifying, treating, and figuring out the source of infestations.
Well, Mr. Crawford, I want to focus your attention on this case. Did you ever do any work for Lakeside Apartments?
Yeah, I was actually there a few times for both companies. I did heat treatments there in 2012, and then once I left the pest specialists and moved on to Bugs Be Gone, I was there quite a bit.
What did they hire you to do?
In the beginning for Bugs Be Gone, it was just kind of basic upkeep type stuff. They didn't have any serious infestation problems, so Miss Walton bought our basic package and basically just kept me around to do preventative maintenance for the building and the tenants.
You mentioned a basic package. What is that?
Well, it's a solid way to prevent bedbug problems. Basically, I would come around every month, inspect the units that needed to get looked at, and then I would spray the building down with the general use insecticide, which helps prevent against a bunch of different types of pests, including bedbugs.
Did Miss Walton ever ask you to do anything beyond that?
Yeah, I actually got a call in November of 2018 about one of the units, Trey Westenmeyer, complaining about a bedbug issue.
What did you have to do?
Because there was potentially a bedbug issue there, I offered to inspect the place and then spray it down. But I told her that if there was a serious problem that they'd have to do a heat treatment from a professional who had the right equipment.
How could you tell if there was a serious problem?
Well, for one, you would obviously see a large number of the bugs themselves, but they also leave behind dark black fecal spots and their shed skins from when they molt.
With that in mind, I want to focus on that specific unit, unit number 10. Did you ever see any signs of a serious infestation?
Well, no, but when I tried to do my inspection, Miss Westenmeyer actually wouldn't even let me into the place.
What do you mean by that?
Trey told us that we couldn't come in to inspect the apartment, and then also mentioned that the maintenance guy hadn't given her enough of a notice. The two of them got into some kind of argument about it, so I wasn't able to do the inspection.
After the plaintiff didn't let you in the first time, what happened next?
I had to wait until a couple of days later until the maintenance person called me back and told me that Westenmeyer was gone. I didn't really want to bug her again, and since she wasn't sure how long she'd be out of the apartment, I had to move quickly to avoid bothering her.
Did you see any bugs?
No, I was moving quickly. I wasn't able to shake the whole place down and look in the baseboards and whatnot, but I didn't see any evidence on any surfaces, and I didn't see any of the signs of bed bugs either. Just to be sure, I did make sure to spray the whole place down with our insecticide, though.
Did you ever get a chance to do a more thorough inspection?
I did. A couple of weeks later, when I was doing my regular treatments, I got asked to look at the place again, just to be sure. I agreed and told him I'd spray the place down again.
What did you see this time?
Well, I made sure to take my time a little bit more this run around. I looked along both of the beds. I stripped the sheets and the pillowcases to look for the signs of the bed bugs. But again, I didn't see any of the insects, and I also didn't see any of the fecal spots or any of the other signs of them.
Well, did you see any evidence for how bed bugs could have entered the apartment?
I did. I actually noted that there was a travel bag and a suitcase on the ground.
Mr. Crawford, my understanding is that you've got a chart showing how bed bugs can spread. Could you use the screen share feature to show it to us?
Sure.
What are we looking at here?
This is just a sort of a generic floor plan of a house.
So can you show us how travel bags could be a source of bed bugs?
Objection, Your Honor, improper expert opinion under Rule 702. May I be heard?
You may.
Your Honor, 702 has 4 prongs. I'm specifically objecting to prong A, that this witness has the knowledge to talk specifically about the source of bed bugs. He talked extensively today about his experience eradicating bed bugs and how to control pests and how to make sure they're removed from an apartment. We heard no foundation about how he knows specifically about the source of bed bugs and how they can travel in a unit or between units.
May I respond to that, Your Honor?
You may.
The witness is not giving an opinion here. He is simply noting evidence that travel might be a source of bed bugs, which he picked up in his years of experience as an exterminator. This witness does have specialized knowledge as an exterminator through the many cases he's worked on, and finding a source of bed bugs is part of his job. He's able to testify about a possible source of that today.
Can you remind me, in a moment, Ms. Sandu, can you please remind me of the question that's pending?
My question was, so can you show us how travel bags could be a source of bed bugs?
Okay, and yes, you may respond to that proper.
Yes, Your Honor. Again, like we said, this witness has a history of pest control. He deals with removing pests from an environment. He deals with spraying the apartment and how to do heat treatment. But he never said anything about how he knows how pests get into a house, specifically bed bugs, their source, how they travel from bags into a room and between units. That foundation hasn't been laid. So as of now, it's an improper expert opinion.
Thank you. Your objection is noted. I think it's a good objection. I'm going to overrule it at this time, but feel free to re-raise it if you feel like his testimony is getting closer to offering the opinion that Ms. Sandu said wouldn't be forthcoming. So let's see where we go from here, but at this point, the objection is overruled. Thank you.
So Mr. Crawford, getting back to your chart here, can you show us how travel bags could be a source of bed bugs?
Sure. So in my experience, sometimes motels or hotels or places like that actually have bed bugs in it. And if you stay in one of those motels and the bug's attached to something like your suitcase or a bag and you bring that back to your own home, that's how they can get transferred there.
Well, what happens if you bring them into your house?
Well, I mean, as they reproduce, they spread. So you can go from a small problem to a much bigger problem in a matter of months. They'll spread along your furniture, your wood baseboards, and all sorts of other things until they infest other parts of your home.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. You can take the chart down. Now, I want to talk about what you did after finding that potential source of exposure. Did you follow up?
I certainly tried to, but the next time that I showed up for another follow-up a couple of weeks later, Westenmeyer, she was in the apartment again, and she said it wasn't a good time, and she locked the deadbolt and told me to come back some other time.
To be clear, when was the last time you inspected the plaintiff's apartment?
That would have been in December of 2018. After that incident, I never got a chance to look at the place again.
Did you try?
I did. I came back month after month, but each time it was the same thing again. She told me it wasn't a good time and told me to come back again.
Did you ever find any bed bugs in Lakeside?
I did actually, some signs of them. After a couple of months of that, I noticed some signs when I was inspecting a different unit a couple of doors down.
What sort of signs did you see?
Well, there were some fecal matter spots on the bed, which are a pretty clear indicator of bed bugs. I didn't see any of the actual bugs or their shed skins, but at that point, I thought it was possible that there was an issue. So I recommended that Walton hire a specialist to deal with them.
Did you see any of those signs in the plaintiff's room?
When I had the chance to get in there, no, but to be fair, there was a 5-month gap between my last inspection and then when they showed up a couple of doors down. I don't have any idea if they were there during that period.
If you'd
Objection on our speculation, if I may be heard.
You may.
Your Honor, this witness said a specific statement, when the bed bugs showed up. There's no way for this witness to know when the bed bugs showed up in Unit 12. He can speak that that's when he saw the bed bugs in Unit 12, but he cannot speculate to is when the bed bugs showed up in that unit.
Okay, I admit that we don't have a court reporter here, so I cannot recall exactly how the witness testified. So your objection is well taken. In the future, let's be precise, Mr. Crawford, with our language. You may testify as to your personal observations. You may not testify as to things beyond that. So your objection is noted. Unfortunately, without a court reporter, I don't quite know what the statement was. So I'm going to overrule the objection. Let's move on, but let's try to keep it contained to this witness's knowledge. Thank you.
Mr. Crawford, if you had been able to do a treatment of the plaintiff's apartment, could that have helped?
Of course, the chemicals that we use don't get rid of established colonies or really serious problems, but they can help prevent spread or knock out smaller issues. Now, if I had had the opportunity to spray in there, odds are that would have gone a long way to dealing with the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-examination, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Crawford, I want to start by talking about how widespread the bed bugs were at Lakeside Apartments. You've done extermination work at Lakeside Apartments, right?
That's right. I have 2 main occasions when I worked for the pest specialist, and then again when I worked for Bugs Begun.
So you're familiar with the layout.
I am.
I want to talk about 3 units. Unit 10, Unit 11, and Unit 12. Those 3 units are right next to each other, right?
That's right, in succession.
Let's start by talking about Unit 12. Just to be clear, Unit 12 does not belong to Ms. Westermeyer, right?
That's right. That belongs to someone named Jalen Sampson.
Right, that's another tenant.
That's right.
And you did an inspection of Unit 12.
I did.
You checked their mattress.
That's right. When I looked along the bed, I saw some black spots on the bed skirt.
Right, so you checked their mattress and you saw black spots, right?
That's right.
And brown spots.
That's right. Those were consistent with bed bugs.
So you knew at some point there were bed bugs on that mattress.
That's right.
Let's talk about Unit 11. You inspected that unit as well, right?
Yep, I did.
And it was cluttered.
That's right. That was the apartment belonging to Taylor Bauer. Some people might call her a hoarder, and I wouldn't say that's an inaccurate assessment.
So, Mr. Crawford, in your words, she was a hoarder.
That's right. She had a very messy apartment. There was all sorts of junk in there.
And a cluttered environment is good for bed bugs.
That's right. It can make detecting them hard.
In fact, you were sure there were pests in Unit 11.
That's right. I never actually saw any, but with all the clutter in there, it'd be hard to believe they weren't.
So, Mr. Crawford, based on your experience and based on how cluttered that unit was, you were sure there were pests in Unit 11.
No, they certainly could have been, but like I said, I didn't actually see any, but there was so much stuff, it's hard to tell.
Mr. Crawford, despite you not seeing them, you were still sure there were pests in Unit 11, right?
That's right.
Well, let's talk about Unit 10. Unit 10 belongs to Ms. Westermeyer, right?
That's right.
You saw photos of her apartment.
I did. I believe there are 3 pictures taken in her daughter's room.
And those photos had black spots in them.
That's right.
The same black spots that we talked about in Unit 12.
That's right. Those are indicative of bedbug fecal matter. I think those pictures were taken during the period in which she wouldn't let me into the apartment.
And so, Mr. Crawford, those were consistent with bedbug fecal matter.
They were.
You even saw a picture of a live bedbug from her apartment.
That's right.
And bedbugs can reproduce quickly.
That's right. Like I said, they can lay up to like 3 or 4 eggs per day. So you can go from a small problem to a big problem as they reproduce and go to other units.
And they can spread from unit to unit.
That's right.
I want to talk about what you told the defendant. You sent the defendant an email right after finding the bed bugs in Unit 12.
That's right.
You would recognize a copy of that email if I showed it to you?
Yeah, I would.
Your Honor, we're now screen sharing Exhibit 7 on the screen. Mr. Crawford, is that a fair and accurate copy of the email you sent the defendant?
Yep, that's right. Looks like that's the email I sent on June 6th.
Your Honor, we now offer Exhibit 7 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, hearsay.
To the statement in its entirety or to specific statements within the email?
To the statements in its entirety from the witness, Blaine Crawford.
Okay, could you explain a little bit about your objection so that plaintiff's counsel can respond?
Yes, Your Honor, I don't believe that these statements can be accepted under the hearsay rule 801 D2A. Mr. Crawford does not actually work for Lakeside Apartments. He's an independent contractor working for Bugs Be Gone and is not an agent of Kieran Walton. Therefore, the hearsay rule 801 D2 does not apply. This is still hearsay.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Oh, here, you may.
Your Honor, we're actually, this exhibit is not hearsay because we're not using it for the truth of the matter asserted. We're using it to show the subsequent action of the defendant. So when the defendant received this email, the effect it had on her. So just the actions that she did or did not take after receiving this email. There's no truth matter that we're trying to use from this exhibit, so it's not hearsay.
May I respond to that, Your Honor?
You may.
I do believe that opposing counsel is using these statements for the truth matter to say and elicit that this apartment specifically needed heat treatments. It was their assertion today that they mentioned in opening statements that the defendant, Kieran Walton, failed to make heat treatments of the units in Lakeside Apartments. They are using these statements to elicit that fact that this apartment needed a heat treatment. It is used for the truth of the matter asserted here.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
You may.
I have a couple responses. First, Your Honor, nowhere in this exhibit does it say anything about heat treatment. And because that statement's not explicitly in Exhibit 7, there's no hearsay being used from this exhibit. And second of all, Your Honor, heat treatment came from this witness himself. He said that in the past, he's recommended heat treatment to the defendant. None of that is hearsay, Your Honor.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. Your objection is well taken. I'm going to overrule the objection with a specific limiting instruction and a caution to the plaintiff that we are not going to use this exhibit to prove that there were bed bugs in Unit 12 in 2019. You can use it for other purposes, such as you described, to show subsequent actions and defendant's knowledge, but we are not going to use this specific exhibit. You can still argue based on his testimony or other witnesses' testimony that there were bed bugs then, but we're not going to use it for the purpose of the truth statements contained within the exhibit. There will be a limiting instruction issued to the jury to that effect. So with that, the objection is overruled, and let's please proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. Crawford, you told the defendant, quote, "We did see black spots along the mattress seams and bed skirt in the main bedroom."
That's right. Like I said before, there were bedbug fecal matter along the bed skirt.
You told the defendant, quote, "Those spots are consistent with bedbug fecal matter."
That's right.
You told the defendant, quote, "We're not really set up to address widespread bedbug infestations."
That's correct.
You told the defendant, quote, "If I were you, I would get in touch with guys over at Pest Specialists."
That's right. Like I mentioned earlier, they're the people who have the right equipment to do a heat treatment.
So that's a yes, Mr. Crawford. You told the defendant, "If I were you, I would get in touch with guys at Pest Specialists."
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Your Honor, we're now taking down Exhibit 7 from screen share. Mr. Crawford, I want to talk about what the defendant should have done. When a bedbug infestation is severe enough, heat treatment is necessary.
That's right. That's the surefire way to get rid of a serious problem.
And it's expensive.
That's right. Like I mentioned earlier, it can cost a couple $1,000s.
But that was not the first time you recommended to the defendant to use a different treatment on Lakeside Apartments.
No, like I said, if there's a serious problem, like I did in 2012, they should use something like a heat treatment.
Mr. Crawford, you once told the defendant that one of the units should be deep cleaned.
That's right. That was Taylor Bauer's apartment.
When you told the defendant that one of the units should be deep cleaned, she told you, quote, "I already pay you guys way too much."
That's right. That's what she said.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Any redirect examination?
No, Your Honor. I just ask that this witness may step down.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Crawford. Defense, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Miss Kieran Walton. Would you please introduce yourself for the members of the jury?
Hello, my name is Kieran Walton.
What do you do, Miss Walton?
I've got my hands in a lot of different projects. I'm a working mom, so sometimes it feels like I have 2 full-time jobs. But during the week, I invest in and manage real estate, and I've been grateful enough to have had a lot of successes in that arena.
How do you know the plaintiff, Trey Westenmeyer?
Trey was a tenant at one of my properties, Lakeside Apartments.
Well, Miss Walton, let's start from the beginning here, before the plaintiff moved into your building. Could you tell us when you bought Lakeside?
I purchased Lakeside back in 1999. I was looking for a good first investment in real estate, and I wanted to find a comfortable home for my mother.
Did you live there at that time?
No, I didn't move in right away, but as my mom started to get older, I wanted to be closer to her, so I got my very own unit at Lakeside back in 2004.
Miss Walton, before the plaintiff moved into the building, did you ever see any bed bugs yourself?
No. I've owned Lakeside for over 20 years now, and before Trey moved in, I never saw any bed bugs in my apartment or my mother's.
Well, how about the other tenants? Did you ever get any complaints about bed bugs?
We've only had a couple reports during the entire time that I've owned the place. But when you own a complex for a few decades, you're bound to run into these occasionally.
Did you have those problems treated when they came up?
Yes, of course. We always handled it immediately.
Well, Miss Walton, let's move and let's talk about the problems that started once the plaintiff moved into the building. Could you tell us when that was?
Trey moved in back in 2018.
And which apartment did she move into?
That would be apartment number 10, which actually used to be my mom's old apartment before she passed away. My daughter and I really spent a lot of time there, and she loved the place. So I really thought that Trey and her kiddo would enjoy the space too.
Did the plaintiff have any way of contacting you if she had any issues with the apartment?
Yes, of course. Tenants can enter maintenance requests through the building, but I also gave Trey my email and my phone number in case there were any issues.
Could you tell us when you first started hearing about bed bugs from the plaintiff?
That would be about a month after Trey moved in, around late November. I got an email from Trey saying that she thought there might be bed bugs in her apartment.
Ms. Walton, how did you react to getting that email?
At first, I was extremely alarmed. I can only imagine how frightening it would be if me and my daughter felt like we couldn't sleep in our own home. So I decided to stop by Trey's apartment that very night.
Did you get a chance to speak with her that evening?
Yes, I did. And Trey told me that the bedbug problem really wasn't that big of a deal.
Did she say what caused the problem?
Trey said that she may have brought back some bedbugs from traveling.
Ms. Walton, how did you react when the plaintiff told you she might have brought bedbugs into your building?
I was definitely concerned about the situation, and I felt bad for Trey. But considering how much he travels and spends time in different motels, there's always that possibility of bringing back bedbugs. Regardless, I told Trey that I would send someone over to check it out as soon as possible.
Well, let's talk about how you went about solving that problem. Could you tell us what the first step you took was?
Well, immediately after my conversation with Trey, I stopped by our property manager, Jesse Rogers' apartment, and I told him to call in an exterminator for the very next day.
Do you know if he managed to get an exterminator?
Yes, he did. And the exterminator came in the next morning.
And did the exterminator manage to spray down that apartment?
No, the exterminator was actually unable to access the apartment. Trey turned him away.
What do you mean the plaintiff turned him away?
Trey refused to let the exterminator into the apartment. The day after Trey's complaint, I got a phone call from our head of maintenance, and in the background, I could hear Trey just screaming about how she wasn't going to let anyone into the apartment.
What did you do when she wouldn't let the exterminator into the apartment?
I did the only thing that I could. I told the exterminator I would pay him for his time and asked him to come back as soon as we could get access to the apartment.
Did the exterminator ever actually make it in?
Yes. I had our head of maintenance set up the exterminator for the next time that Trey was away on business, since Trey wouldn't let us into the apartment.
Well, Ms. Westenmeyer, what did you do after the exterminator finally made it into that apartment?
Well, I wanted to be extra careful, so I asked maintenance to bring the exterminator again for a follow-up inspection.
Do you know if that follow-up happened?
Yes, the exterminator came again about 3 weeks after the initial inspection of Trey's apartment, and I saw him do a walkthrough of the apartment, and he did not report seeing any bed bugs at all, so I figured the problem was resolved.
Following those 3 separate visits from the exterminator, do you know if there was anything else done to ensure there wouldn't be bed bugs?
Yes, of course. Even though the problem seemed to be resolved, I wanted to set up the necessary precautions to ensure that we didn't have any more problems. So I asked the exterminator to come by once a month to spray down Trey's apartment and inspect the rest of the building. I also asked him to personally let me know if he found any bed bugs anywhere else in the building.
Ms. Walton, let's shift a little bit and let's talk about your communication with the plaintiff after you got that exterminator into the apartment. Did the plaintiff ever complain to you about bed bugs again after that?
No. The next time I saw her, Trey just thanked me for the work that I had done.
Well, after that last conversation about bed bugs, did you ever talk with her about anything else before she moved out?
I only had one other conversation with her a few months later.
What did you talk about?
Well, at that point, Trey had stopped paying her rent, and it was a very different conversation. Trey got really aggressive and started threatening me.
What do you mean she threatened you?
Well, she told me that I should let her and her kiddo live in the apartment for free and that I should use my connections to help her career.
In that conversation, did she ever bring up bed bugs?
No, she didn't bring up bed bugs at all. She just kept demanding that I help get her a promotion so she can stop staying at budget motels.
Did the plaintiff tell you what she was going to do if you didn't meet her demands?
She said that I would pay and that one day a jury would give her everything that I have.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. I have nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-examination, please.
Yes, Your Honor, just a moment to set up my camera.
Of course.
May I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon, Miss Walton.
Good afternoon.
I want to start by talking about the responsibilities of your job.
Sure.
You're a landlord.
Yes, that's right.
You're a billionaire.
Yes.
You're a billionaire because you own a lot of property, right?
Yes, I own a lot of property. I work in the entertainment industry. That's right.
Ma'am, you have certain tenants on those properties.
That's correct.
And you have responsibilities to those tenants.
Yes, of course.
It's your responsibility to make sure their units are safe, right?
Absolutely.
To make sure they're sanitary.
Yes, of course.
To make sure they're livable.
Yes.
You had all of those responsibilities to the plaintiff, Miss Westenmeyer.
Yes.
Ma'am, while Miss Westenmeyer lived in your building, she actually asked you for help, right?
She did. And I sent in an exterminator the very next morning. I really try to make sure that tenants feel heard. I take tenants' complaints very seriously.
Well, ma'am, I want to make something very clear. When Miss Westenmeyer asked you for help in dealing with that bedbug problem, you thought she was lying to you.
No, not at first.
Ma'am, eventually you thought the plaintiff was lying to you.
Yes, after the exterminator came in and didn't report seeing any bedbugs, I thought that Trey might have been dishonest with me about how bad the bedbugs were.
So, ma'am, that's a yes to my question.
Sure, after the exterminator reported not seeing any bedbugs.
Ma'am, in your own words, you would rather pay $1 million in legal fees than give the plaintiff 1 cent for her lies.
Objection to more prejudicial than probative, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Clarion, what's your response? Yep.
Yes, Your Honor. In order for something to be more prejudicial than probative, it has to substantially outweigh any sort of probative value. In this case, that's not what happened. That's not what's happening. I'm asking this defendant what her opinion is of paying the plaintiff money. In this case, Your Honor, that's what we're here to determine. And they're determined to say that the plaintiff is a liar and that they never give him a single cent. That's highly probative for this case, Your Honor.
Your Honor may be heard.
You may.
What Miss Walton is or isn't willing to pay in legal damages does not make this case any fact in this case more or less likely. Now, Miss Walton stated that she wasn't going to pay legal damages to the plaintiff in this case, and to use this line of testimony is just to prejudice the jury against Miss Walton. It doesn't make it more or less likely any of the elements that they have to prove here today.
Response to that, Your Honor?
No need. I'm going to overrule the objection. Let's please continue.
So, ma'am, that's a yes to my question. You'd rather pay $1 million in legal fees than give the plaintiff a single cent for her lies.
Sure, but it's not about the money. It's about the principle of it. Trey sent me one email. I had an exterminator come in, and then she thanked me and never complained again. So I think that Trey is bringing in a faceless suit.
Ma'am, I'm not asking about any of that. I'm just asking if you said those words, and you did.
Yes, but again, it's not about the money.
Well, let's talk about something else you didn't want to pay for. You hired an exterminator, right?
Yes, I did.
You hired an exterminator to inspect all of the units in your apartment building.
Yes, that's right.
And you told that exterminator to contact you if they found evidence of bed bugs.
Yes.
Ma'am, let's talk about the time where he contacted you. Your Honor, I'm now displaying pre-admitted Exhibit 7. Ma'am, this is an email you received from the exterminator that you hired.
Yes, I don't really recall this email. but it appears it was reported June 6th after Trey moved in.
Well, ma'am, that's your email address right there.
Yes, that's right.
It's spelled correctly.
That's right.
I want to talk about what the exterminator told you in this email. The exterminator you hired said, "We're not really set up to address widespread bedbug infestations." All right?
Yes, that's what it says.
Man, he gave you some advice in this email.
Yes, but like I said, I didn't get a chance to see this.
Well, ma'am, he told you if I were you, I'd get in touch with the guys over at Pest Specialists.
Right, that's what he said.
Ma'am, you never hired a pest specialist to treat Miss Westenmeyer's apartment.
This one is in reference to Unit 12, right?
Well, ma'am, I'm not asking about Unit 12. My question was, you never hired a pest specialist to treat Miss Westenmeyer's apartment.
No, I didn't. The exterminator never reported seeing bed bugs in Unit 10, Trey's apartment.
But that's a yes to my question. You never hired a pest specialist to deal with bed bugs in Miss Westenmeyer's apartment.
No, it didn't seem necessary for Miss Westenmeyer's apartment.
Ma'am, let's talk about something else you didn't do. Counsel, you can go ahead and take that down. Ma'am, you were here in court today, right?
Yes.
You heard Dr. Howe testify.
Yes, I did.
You heard him tell us about heat treatment.
Yes.
You know what heat treatment is.
I'm vaguely familiar.
Well, you know it's when they apply extreme heat to kill bed bugs, right?
Right.
Ma'am, you could have paid for a heat treatment on Miss Westenmeyer's apartment.
Yes, I probably could have. But like I said, the exterminator didn't report seeing bed bugs in Unit 10, Trey's apartment. So I thought the problem had been resolved.
Ma'am, I'm not asking what the exterminator reported to you. You could have paid for a heat treatment.
Sure.
And you chose not to.
Right, it didn't seem necessary.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, any redirect examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Walton, that email that you got from the exterminator saying that you should call in specialists, which apartment was that talking about?
That was for Unit 12?
Was that Miss Westenmeyer's apartment?
No, Miss Westenmeyer's apartment is Unit 10.
Did the exterminator ever report to you any signs of bed bugs from unit number 10?
No, he did not.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Any recross?
There's no recross, Your Honor. Ms. Walton may be excused.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Walton.
Thank you.
With that, Your Honor, the defense has nothing further and we rest our case in chief.
Excellent. Let's take another 5-minute recess, so we'll come back at my time again, 11:17. Appreciate it. Okay, let's please come back to order. If I could have a representative from both plaintiff and defense, let me know they're ready.
This is President and ready to proceed.
Thank you.
Us as well, Your Honor.
Excellent. And do we have the scoring judges here? Let's please start with, I forgot my list. Hang on, give me just a moment. Maybe I can just message you all and see who's present. Judge Sokoloff, are you here?
Here.
Excellent. Judge Pope?
I'm so sorry about that. I'm here.
No, no problem. We're just getting started. Judge Fain?
Here.
Judge Dowell?
Here.
Judge Reisner?
Here.
Excellent. Let's please proceed with plaintiff's closing statement.
Her dream home was a nightmare. It's October of 2018. Miss Westenmeyer and her little girl have just moved in to their dream home, a new apartment at Lakeside. After a long weeks of moving in, they can finally get some much needed rest. But what you learned today is that it was impossible to sleep in that apartment. Impossible to live in that apartment. That's because what Miss Westenmeyer soon found out is that there were bed bugs nesting in their walls, in their furniture, in their beds. Miss Westenmeyer, she does everything she can to fix the problem. But her daughter is still waking up with these bites. She calls her landlord asking for help, but she doesn't even pay for the treatment her apartment desperately needs. What you learned today is that Miss Westenmeyer's dream home was a nightmare. That's why we as the plaintiff are suing the defendant, the landlord, for breaching an implied warrant of habitability. That's a bit technical, but all it really means, members of the jury, are three things. First, the plaintiff suffered from a bed bug problem that wasn't her fault. Second, the defendant knew about that problem. And third, the defendant was unreasonable in dealing with that bed bug problem. Now, we had to prove each of those three things to you by what's called preponderance of the evidence. That doesn't mean you have to be 100% sure about every single one. Just that those three things are more likely true than not. And why are we suing for this, members of the jury? Because it's no question today that Miss Westenmeyer suffered. Both parties agree that she lost over $7,000 worth of property while she lived there. And in addition to that, we're also suing the defendant for what's called punitive damages. That's $500,000. And the reason we're doing that is a penalty to make sure that Miss Walton's unreasonable behavior doesn't happen again. And we proved all of that to you today, members of the jury. So let's walk through each of those three things one at a time, starting with that first one. Miss Westenmeyer suffered from a bed bug infestation that wasn't her fault. How do we know that? Well, you saw it for herself. The pictures in Exhibit 10. This is what Miss Westenmeyer's apartment looked like. You learned what those spots are, members of the jury. Bed bug fecal matter. Those hundreds of spots on her walls, on her bed, on her furniture were left behind by Exhibit 2. This bed bug, but not just this one. All of those marks were made by hundreds of bed bugs living in that apartment. And the defense might say, well, hold on a minute. Miss Westenmeyer, she brought these bed bugs in herself. But we know that's not true. Because you heard the former tenant come on the stand today and said, I saw these bed bugs in that building years before Miss Westenmeyer ever moved in. It's no question whether she suffered from a bedbug problem. That leads to my second point. The defendant knew about that bedbug problem. Members of the jury, today you heard the defendant's own words, overheard by other witnesses and admitted by herself. When she talked about that apartment building, she said there was a pest problem that half my residents were complaining about. Then she said heat treatment, I'd never pay for that. Why not? Because I fired my last property manager for spending too much of my money. You heard what she really thought of that apartment building, despite what she told you on the stand. That all done? I can finally tear Lakeside down and build new luxury apartments. Members of the jury, the defendant knew about the problem. She just didn't care. That leads to my third point. She was unreasonable in dealing with the bedbug problem. Today, you learned how you're supposed to deal with bedbugs. You're supposed to hire a pest specialist to do a heat treatment. Well, the defense might say, hold on a minute, we hired an exterminator. That's good enough. But listen to what the exterminator actually told the defendant in Exhibit 7. He said, we're not really cut out to deal with widespread bedbug infestation. If I were you, I'd get in touch with the guys over at Pest Specialists. Members of the jury, you heard today that after there were bedbugs found in that building, she never hired a pest specialist and she never did that heat treatment. The defendant was highly unreasonable in dealing with that problem. But let's talk about what the defense wants you to believe. They want you to believe that Ms. Westenmeyer brought in those bedbugs, lied about them, and stopped the exterminators from doing their job. But you learned why she did that. She told the exterminators to come back once her daughter wasn't in the apartment. She didn't want those toxic fumes around her little girl. And members of the jury, think about what's reasonable. That mother who doesn't want her 12-year-old girl in the apartment, or a billionaire landlord who doesn't want to pay for the appropriate treatment? Find Ms. Walton liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kalarian. Closing statement for the defense, please.
Yes, Your Honor, if I could just have a moment to get set up.
Of course.
And before I begin, may I ask if you can see and hear me all right? Members of the jury, it's the middle of the night. The plaintiff jolts awake and looks around, itching and scratching. She sees Motel 3, the latest in a long line of low-end motels that she's had to stay in while chasing stories as a reporter. She lays awake and she counts the minutes till she can go home, until she can leave Motel 3 behind and stop getting eaten alive. Members of the jury, this time she doesn't just bring back a story. She brings back bedbugs. So she calls up her building owner. She says, I have a bedbug problem, and they have an exterminator there the very next morning, and that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because the plaintiff refused to cooperate with building staff and refused to allow them to settle the problem before it got worse. Members of the jury, she caused the problem and prevented the solution. And it's those actions that have brought us here today. Now, the plaintiff today have alleged a breach of the warranty of habitability, which means that there's 5 things they would normally have to show us. But as my colleague told you in opening statements, there's only 2 things that are in contention here today. It's whether Ms. Westenmeyer was the cause of the bedbug problem, and whether the defendant, Ms. Walton, took reasonable steps to resolve the issue. And the plaintiff held the burden in today's case. They had to show us that each of those elements was more likely than not true. We didn't have to call a single witness or ask a single question, but we did. So let's look at exactly how the plaintiff failed to meet their burden here today. And let's start with the first thing they had to show us. Now, they had to show us that Ms. Westenmeyer was not the cause of that bed bug issue. Members of the jury, to answer the question of who caused this problem, we only need to remember one name. That's Motel 3. You see, we heard today that the plaintiff was no stranger to her fair share of dank and dingy motels, but that Motel 3, well, that one was in a league of its own. Fleas and mosquitoes, itching and scratching. We heard just how much the plaintiff could not stand staying in Motel 3. But members of the jury, she felt so strongly about this that she sent her boss an email about it. We got to see that email here today. In that email, she told her boss that she was being eaten alive by fleas or mosquitoes or maybe something else. You see, just a few days later, after sending this email, she'd start finding bed bugs in her own apartment. You see, we heard here today from the plaintiff's expert and the defense's expert that bed bugs are commonly found in motels, that travel is one of the most common ways that they travel and enter a home. Members of the jury, the plaintiff today wants us to believe that these bed bugs didn't come from Motel 3. Now that they were years old, that they came back from 2012. Well, let's take a step back here and think about what they're actually asking us to believe here today. They want us to believe that these bed bugs sat in that building for 6 years without a single report, without a single complaint. Nobody noticed them. They just hung around for years on end, and then they just happened to scuttle out of the floorboards and out of the walls and into all kinds of apartments right after the plaintiff comes back from a motel complaining of itching, scratching, and being eaten by bugs. Members of the jury, we have to ask ourselves if that's reasonable. The plaintiff was the cause of the problem. But that's not all. Not only did she cause the problem, she prevented the solution. We heard today that when she called Ms. Walton complaining about bed bugs, Ms. Walton found her a solution immediately. Ms. Walton had an exterminator at her front door the very next morning. But how did the plaintiff react to being handed this solution to her problem? She slammed the door in that exterminator's face, locked it, and told him he could go get lost. Maybe one time. Maybe if this was just one time, that would be okay. But members of the jury, we heard today from that exterminator. We heard just how hard the plaintiff made his job. We heard that month after month, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, he came to her apartment over and over again. And that over and over again. November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, she turned him away. She refused to let him do his job. Members of the jury, if her dream house was such a nightmare, she sure wasn't doing a lot to fix it. She was turning away the man who was offering her a solution. Maybe her daughter was in the shower one time. Maybe one time she could have said, okay, come back another time. But 6 times? Member of the jury, 6 times is an obstruction. She caused the problem, then prevented the solution. That's why we ask that you find the only just verdict, a verdict of not liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any rebuttal from plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor, brief rebuttal. The defense told you that the plaintiff brought the problem and prevented the solution. That's not what you heard today. What you heard is that the defendant knew about the problem, but didn't want to pay for the solution. No specialist, no heat treatment, and no thorough inspection. Ms. Westenmeyer's dream home was a nightmare. Find the defendant liable. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Let's please just give the scoring judges a minute to fill out their ballots.